Welcome to this video lecture on instructional text and design in theory. In this lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about different learning theories that are related to instructional text and how we can design taking into account these learning theories. There's a lot more to know about instructional text, but those things are covered very well in the readings. So make sure you do the readings this week as well. So let me share here for instructional design and instructional text. We're going to talk about two theories. One is community of inquiry, and the other is the 5 spaces for design that I introduced last week. But first, what is instructional text? If you haven't gotten to the readings yet, it's basically any text you write as part of a learning context. So we think of like primary content or worksheets or textbooks, but it's also very important to write clear instructions, how you interact with students on discussion boards, how you give them feedback, and then simply emails and announcements. We can follow design principles to make our text most effective in all these situations. So the first theory we're going to look at as it relates to instructional text is a community of inquiry theory. And this theory was originally developed in 1999 by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. And at the time, there was quite a bit of online learning being developed, but it was almost exclusively text-based because there wasn't the bandwidth or the structures to support video or even very much picture or audio. And so a lot of the concern was about how can we support effective text-based learning environments online. And so Garrison and friends created this model to try to understand what goes into an effective learning experience, especially for higher learning outcomes, such as in higher education. It's a constructivist perspective. So it's based on that perspective that students are constructing their own knowledge about some activity or event or subject. So the first presence is social presence. And social presence is your ability to bring your own personality into the situation, to establish relationships and include some type of group cohesion. So the 3 things they talked about were effective communication, open communication, and then that's group cohesion. So designing online courses that support this type of social presence. The next is cognitive presence. Sorry, should have turned off my notifications. Cognitive presence is about how you're actually constructing and thinking about the content and the topic or the problem space of learning. So the elements they put with that were some exploration of ideas, integration of ideas, and then how we apply ideas to problems or issues. And so we can design instructional contexts that support actually developing that type of cognitive skill. Basically what they were saying was, yeah, we can have a friendly social atmosphere, but unless we have some type of thinking and some type of cognitive presence, they're not going to learn anything. And then the final area was teaching presence. And that's just how the teacher facilitates the learning situation. Originally, they focused on how the teacher provides direct instruction and then how they facilitate discussions and other learning opportunities. Eventually, some other research said that the design itself, even if a situation is created by an instructional designer, when it's implemented by an instructor, the way the instructor adapts the design is also very important. So according to this theory, when you pull all these pieces together, you get your educational experience. So when you're writing text, you have to think about how it supports these different types of presence, both in formal text writing as well as just ongoing emails or other types of support that we talked about earlier. The other theory I wanted to just briefly touch on was the 5 spaces for design. Usually when we're writing instructional text, we think of it as an artifact. It's a concrete thing, but text is also could be considered a process. So a process is kind of like a template. It's something that can be instantiated in multiple ways, in different contexts. So for example, if you have a lesson plan, the plan itself is a process, but then when it's actually implemented, that's when it becomes something other than a process, usually an experience, because it could be implemented in different ways. So instructional designers primarily create processes that then others pick up and actually instantiate. So if you think about an instructional text, for example, maybe an announcement I send out, the way each of you reads that announcement is going to be slightly different. Basically, what I'm doing is trying to set up a cognitive process for you to go through. So when I think of designing my text that way, it helps me kind of consider, okay, what's going to happen as they go through this announcement step by step? What do I need to highlight to improve that process so it's more effective? It also comes down to experience, the educational experience. If my text is really confusing, then it creates a very bad educational experience. And there's also the whole course experience, how we experience the course as a whole. The types of language I use affect how you feel and what your learning experience is. Systems is a harder one because it's usually looked at a broader field. We could have text that actually create systems, like text could create guidelines for financial systems or credit systems or technology systems, but it's a little bit farther removed from what we're talking about here. And finally, culture. The way that we communicate through text in our courses, in our teaching, in our emails, set up a certain type of culture that I hope that the language that I use becomes similar to the language maybe that you use, or maybe some practices I use, like I try really hard to listen openly to your ideas and respond to them appropriately. I hope that that's a culture we build in our class. I hope that we're willing to try new things and possibly fail. And so I try to show that through even things I text and say, hey, I tried this. It didn't work so well. So we're going to try something else. I try to set up a culture through how I talk about things with you. And of course, I'm not perfect. Okay, final takeaways. The first, use text to support your social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And then consider how your text influences the overall learning design. And finally, please complete the readings. There's really good information about different types of texts, about visual designs of text and typography that is better put in a book than it would be me presenting it to you. So please read that and follow those guidelines as you complete an assignment that's going to come up in Moodle pretty soon, where you're going to be actually revising some instructional text. Thanks for listening.